Good evening, everyone. How are you tonight? I guess the saying really is true. If you build it, they will come. How many of you? Oh, hi, Bill. Long time no see. Yeah, it's amazing to see you. So happy you're here in the front row. Sorry, old friends. What can you say? How many of you? Pull that off. You'd all be sitting on each other's laps. Wouldn't that have been a fun night? Wow. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. For those of you who don't know, I'm Elizabeth Hamilton, the Foundation Director here at Carmel Clay Public Library. I have the lucky job of planning events like this and bringing you all here. So thank you so much for being here. Just a shout out to a couple of people before we start tonight. Oh, and if you haven't already silenced your phone, could you please do that? We would love for you to do that. The second thing I'd like to request, should you need to go to the restroom during the presentation, that's fine with us, but we do ask you army crawl out of the room so you don't distract the other people in the audience. The restrooms are down at the end of the hallway, not a problem. As you all know, tonight really was a dream of Jeff Worrell's, and he put this together. He contacted the library. He said, would you be willing to put this program on with me? And as you know, I would do anything for Jeff. Are you kidding? I was like, yes, please, we would love to. And here we are, right? Ready for a great evening. So thank you so much, Jeff. As you know, at the end of the evening, one of the things we love to do is sell the author's books and get them signed. So you all get to wait in line and meet Lexi, which will be lovely. The books are for sale over in this corner. We would like a stampede at the end of the presentation, so go ahead and rush right over. I am not her publisher, but I could be, right? So what can I say? But we would love for you to go home with a copy of her book. She will be signing in the back corner, so we're asking you to line up very carefully and get in line for the signing event. Our bookseller tonight is MacArthur's Books in the village of West Clay. How many people love MacArthur's? I love that store too. I don't know if Cynthia's here tonight. I was out the door for a while, but didn't see her. But if she's not, next time you see Cynthia, say, thank you so much for being our bookseller. She's amazing. I would like to invite you back to this room next Tuesday. We are bringing New York Times best-selling author Jeffrey Blunt. He will be here at 6 p.m., so you don't even have to change time. Hop on our website, register, and you are welcome to join us. We would love that. If you look back and see the ladies in the back of the room, they made those cookies for you tonight, so let's give them a big round of applause. Jeff's wife did say when the first tray of cookies came in and there were 20 on it, this is our first civility test. We will see how people behave when there are only 20 cookies for this crowd. Really, they brought more, so that's all right. Okay, Jeff. It's that time of the evening. It's all up to you, and thank you so much.
Wow, thank you. Come on, give it up for Liz Hamilton. Literally, she was out here putting together chairs. Can you believe that? So I am overwhelmed from here and amazed by this tremendous crowd, that there's so many of you who feel strongly about your community enough to attend our event tonight. I am humbled, and I just want to say thank you. Please give yourselves a round of applause. You know, I mean, as we were gathering, I did not hear any loud car horns in the parking garage as you fought over parking spaces. I did not see any pushing or shoving in the elevator from second to first, and I still have yet to see anybody fighting over a chair. So I'm going to assume this is a pretty polite crowd. Would you agree that you're polite? But guess what? That does not automatically mean that you're civil. So I'm even more grateful and thankful to you that you chose to come out tonight to help us tackle this issue and see if we can build and foster and grow a better sense of civility in Carmel. Are you with me? Now, we live in a beautiful community. It has been, ranked the best place to live in America. It's number one in this category. It is top 10 in multiple categories. You have done very well. You have done a lot to make this a great community. But I'm wondering if you can dream with me for just a moment. Do you think it's possible for us to be number one in civility in Carmel, Indiana? That we could be known for that? All right, I'm going to take you up. This is the beginning. This is the start of that effort. I suspect from looking around this room that many of you, like me, sense that there's a little something wrong, a little something off. Maybe a little anxiety concerning how we treat each other. So I'm convinced, as I titled this event, we can do better. So tonight, we are going to discuss civility, a temperament that, to me anyway, feels like it's slowly slipping away. It's maybe something from days gone by. But no, we're not going to let it slip away. I see, around me, there is a lack of civility. I don't know if I have ever run into you, gotten too close at 116th and Rangeline in the roundabout. If I have, I'm sorry. Whoever you were that gave me that gesture, I apologize. But we are going to do better. So some out there, some of you may be saying, oh, come on, this is just human nature. We're all very competitive. Since the days of the caveman and rocks and clubs, and then the printing press, where it was easy to make fun of somebody and distribute it widely, name call and print misinformation. And certainly now, as we deal with a culture that is driven by social media, that is just igniting a negative sense in our community. But yes, we are the victims, and yes, we are the cause. And so I say we must resist. Incivility cannot any longer be the norm in Carmel. We do not accept it. We're not going to justify it. We can do better in our homes, in our schools, with our families, at our work, certainly on social media, in our institutions, and we are going to have something to be proud of. Tonight, I ask you and our entire community to acknowledge that we have a problem, and filled with hope, we can work together towards building that culture that I dream of, where we respect each person as a human being with inherent value. We see our adversaries as moral equals and worthy of our basic respect. So to help us get our arms around this big topic, to understand it, define it, and then go home tonight and tomorrow be able to practice it, I have invited our guest of honor, Alexandra Hudson. I am deeply grateful that I just stumbled upon her book. It was the title, The Soul of Civility, Timeless Principles to Heal Our Society and Ourselves. That spoke to me. So I do not expect tonight to just be a book review. This is a first step for our community. Lexi, as we get to call her now, since we're all going to know her after tonight, is well qualified to lead us back to a culture of civility. So a little bit about Lexi. She is a very popular writer, speaker, former federal appointee to the U.S. Department of Education, and the founder of Civic Renaissance, a publication and intellectual community dedicated to beauty, goodness, and truth. She was named to the 2020 Novak Journalism Fellow and contributes to many media outlets like Fox News, CBS News, the Wall Street Journal. It actually goes on and on and on. But you want to hear from her. She earned a master's degree in public policy at the London School of Economics as a Rotary Scholar. If you're a Rotarian, raise your hand. You got to go give Lexi a hug afterwards. and is an adjunct professor at the Indiana University Lilly School of Philanthropy. Her first masterpiece, this great work, The Soul of Civility, it just came out in October, and it is already being heralded and acclaimed. And to see this group of people who are interested in this topic, it can only go up from here. I hope that you will give Lexi Hudson your warmest welcome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lexi Hudson. So thrilled to be with you here today. It's funny, Jeff. Cynic Renaissance would be a totally different outlet, wouldn't it? Than so that'll be our alter ego if, on our bad days, maybe our less hopeful days. But Civic Renaissance is my publication. Yes. So really thrilled to be here with you. Thank you so much to Jeff and to Liz for putting us together, and thank you to each of you for spending a few minutes of your evening talking about what I think is the most important question and topic of our day, which is how do we flourish amid deep difference? And what does that look like in practice in our deeply divided moment that we find ourselves in right now? I came to my interest in this subject of civility, honestly. My mother is called, get this, Judy the Manners Lady. She is, as I discovered while writing this book, well, she's here, thank you, Mom, for being here tonight. As I discovered while writing this book, my mother is one of actually 4 women who are internationally renowned experts on manners and etiquette, named Judy. There are 4 of them. My mother is just one of them. And my mother's my favorite of these Judiths, these Judys in the manners and courtesy biz. She taught my brothers and I to mind our P's and Q's growing up, and I'm not really someone who likes to follow the rules. I am constitutionally allergic to authority. I always question everything that I'm told to do to this day. And I remember growing up, my mother asking us to set the table just so, and I wondered why. Why do we do things the way we do them? And my mother would say, this is just the way we do it. Now just do what I'm telling you to do. And that never really satisfied me. I always hungered for a reasoning behind what we do, our social norms and our social and cultural expectations. Is it just because some Judy of a different era and a different place said that we should? Is that a sufficient reason to continue to do things the way that we do them? And so I always hungered. I always had these questions of why, the why that underpins our norms. In addition to teaching us the ways and means of politeness and etiquette, my mother is the true embodiment of civility, as I define it and unpack it throughout my book. Just utter self-forgetfulness, other-orientedness, kindness and welcoming spirit to the stranger, utter hospitality. Growing up, our home was a revolving door of strangers, newcomers to our community. We had homestays, we had immigrants to our community, friends that we met just on a whim at the mall or after church. Just people were always in our home, and that really, I'm so grateful for that example that she was to my brothers and I in that way. Despite always questioning the rules of etiquette and politeness, I generally followed them. My mother promised me that they would lead to success in school and in work and in life, and she was right. Until I found myself in federal government. I was at the United States Department of Education from 2017 to 2018, a very vitriolic and divided time in our country, in our nation. And there, I found everything I thought to be true about the world, my confidence in the rules of politeness, and even myself questioned. I was in this environment of anti-human flourishing for a year of my life, and I saw these 2 extremes. On one hand, I saw people with sharp elbows. They were people who were ruthless, and they were willing to step on anyone to get ahead. I knew where they stood, and I knew to stay away from them. But then there was this other contingent. And this contingent, at first I thought they were my people. They were polished and poised and polite. But these were people that would smile and flatter me and others one moment and stab us in the back the next. And that really perplexed me. My mother had said growing up that manners mattered because they were an outward expression of our inward character. And yet here I was surrounded by people who were well-mannered enough and yet ruthless and cruel as soon as people no longer served their purposes, no longer useful to them. This experience in government taught me several lessons. It first taught me that these two modes that I experienced in government, the extreme hostility and the extreme politesse, the tone policing and the focus on propriety and etiquette, that they define the two extremes that really define our public life today. I also realized that while these two extremes seem like polar opposites, they're actually very similar. Both modes have an insufficiently high view of the dignity of the human person. They see other people as means to their selfish ends, as opposed to seeing other human beings as ends in themselves, worthy of a bare minimum of respect, just by virtue of our shared moral status as members of the human community. The hostile contingent sees other people as means, as pawns to be bowled over and bullied, whereas the polite contingent sees others as pawns to be manipulated, but both have an insufficiently high view of the dignity of the human person. The last thing this experience taught me is that, as Jeff alluded to, there is an essential distinction between civility and politeness. Politeness, as this experience taught me, is manners, it's etiquette, it's technique, it's external, it's superficial, whereas civility is internal. It's a disposition of the heart. It's a way of seeing others as our moral equals who are worthy of a bare minimum of respect by virtue of our shared human dignity. And that crucially, sometimes actually respecting someone requires being impolite. It requires breaking the rules of propriety and etiquette, telling hard truths, engaging in robust debate. I love etymology. Etymology is throughout my book, and it's just a way, as a mnemonic device as well, to help crystallize ideas and concepts. The etymology of these words connote politeness supports this distinction. And again, today, people often conflate these ideas. They say they either long for more politeness and civility, or they put politeness and civility on tools of people in positions of power and silence the politeness. But both contingents miss, and they fail to sufficiently distinguish these ideas. But the etymology of these words supports this distinction. Politeness comes from the Latin word polio, which means to smooth or to polish, and that's what politeness does. It's external, it's superficial. Again, focusing on the external. Whereas civility comes from the Latin civitas, which is all things related to citizen. That's what civility is, the duties of a citizen in the city. So I learned about this problem in government. I hungered to be part of the solution. I fled government to write this book. And as I began writing, I realized that we're here gathered to talk about the most important question of our day, which is how do we flourish even when we deeply differ and disagree? And it feels like this is the most uncivil moment in maybe human history, but it's actually, as I discovered, this is a timeless problem. This is the defining question of democracy, of the classical liberal project. And this is also the defining question of our species as well. As long as we've been around, we've been trying to do this thing called life together across difference. And we've succeeded more or less at different stages of our eras of our history, but we're profoundly social as a species. We've become fully human in relationship with others, and yet morally and biologically, we are driven to meet our own needs before others, and those two facets of who we are, the self-love and the love of others, are intention. This is a timeless human problem. And yet, just as timeless as the problem, is the solution, and the solution is civility. It is sacrificing the self for the sake of others, for the sake of the human social project, and flourishing in relationship with others. Did you know, we're in a library, this is an appropriate question, did you know that the oldest book in the world is a civility book? It's given to us 4,300 years ago from ancient Egypt. It's called The Teachings of Ptahhotep. And what's incredible is that in these 37 maxims from Ptahhotep, who was an Egyptian advisor, the advisor to the pharaoh, and he wrote these teachings after he had reached the pinnacle of worldly and temporal success. He withdrew from public life, even though he was offered the chance to become pharaoh. He turned that down, withdrew from public life, and instead reflected on the stuff of the good life and the life well lived, and wrote these maxims down in hopes to distill his wisdom and give them to Pharaoh's son, hoping that he would become a wise and just ruler. And they ended up being consumed widely by Egyptian society and even across history and culture as well. For example, the ancient Greeks loved the ancient Egyptians, so it's very possible that they reached the ancient Greek culture, but they're remarkably timeless, these 38 maxims. For example, Ptahhotep says, do not be good to your friends just when you need something. Be good to your friends and your neighbors all the time, just because they're your friends and neighbors. Ptahhotep says, do not abuse a power differential. If you have authority over someone, don't abuse that. Be good and gentle and gracious to the vulnerable in society. Do not slander, Ptahhotep says. He says this in 4 or 5 different maxims. Do not speak ill of someone behind their back. And these could all just as well be in a Judith Martin Miss Manners column in the Washington Post, which is just a wonderful, human nature doesn't change. This is the same problem, same question today as it was in a different time and a different place long ago. And there's a lot of wisdom to be derived from this genre and other times and other places. So timeless problem, timeless solution, what can we do? It's easy to look around us and feel hopeless. We don't see many of our public leaders modeling this. We don't feel this in our neighborhoods, in our schools. What can be done? We can do a lot more than we realize. And I learned this firsthand when I moved here to Indiana. I came home from work one day when I was in federal government and said to my husband, I am done with government. I'm done with Washington, D.C. Let's move to Indiana. I call myself a refugee from federal government. And my husband said to me, okay, sounds good. We'll move to Indiana. He's from here originally. And he said, no take-backs. And 5.5 years later, we're still here. One of my first friends, when I moved to Indiana 5.5 years ago, her name was Joanna Taft. She came up to me after church and she said, hi, I'm Joanna. Would you like to porch with us sometime? I had never heard the word porch used as a verb before, but I was curious and we didn't know many people in town, so we went to her home that afternoon. And what I saw astounded me. I realized that Joanna was staging a quiet revolution from her front porch. She had created a little oasis from our divided and atomized status quo. And she created a place where people across difference can feel seen and known and loved. She had invited people across geography in town, across race, across politics, across class, not to have any sort of structured conversation across difference, just to be. And to remind us what we have in common fundamentally as citizens in this great country and as human beings, first and foremost. I had the privilege of traveling across the country as part of writing this book to speak to people like Joanna, who are taking the same approach. They're saying, I cannot control what is happening in Washington or across the world, but I can control myself. And I met with people who are choosing to make their communities and families stronger, better, and more beautiful from right where they are. With and without a front porch, I met people who hold office hours at coffee shops, who have regular supper clubs or dinner parties, who on their front stoop is just an open space, or on their front lawn even. It's not about the porch. The porch is a metaphor for the power we each have. to create a more civil world by transforming the outsider to the insider, the stranger into the friend, just in how we live our lives. I'm really grateful that each of you are here tonight to talk about this important topic, and this is the beginning of what I hope to be an ongoing conversation about how Carmel can better embody these ideas of civility and dialogue across difference. And I'm thrilled and honored to have a small part to play in that. But we each have far more power than we realize to be part of the solution, and that each of us choosing to reclaim the soul of civility might empower us to change the world. I'll leave you with Portia's closing monologue from The Merchant of Venice, that I think is just beautiful and apt, from Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice, and very apt for our current moment, that the quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth like a gentle rain from heaven upon the earth beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. It is an attribute of God himself, for earthly power doth then show like God's when mercy seasons justice. Thank you so much.
All right, now we're going to get down to work. Now, was that great or what? Do you know what civility is now? Do you have a feel for it? How about some clapping? How about if we make that our rule? If you're happy, you clap. If you're not happy, you leave. Okay. All right. Okay. Great job. Great job. One bit of business. So we're going to do some Q&A, a couple of questions to now get down. How do we bring this to Carmel? And what do we do? I want to get questions from you, but I have one bit of business. I'm really honored tonight that my colleague, President of the City Council, Tony Green, is here. Thank you, Tony, for coming, taking time away from your family. Please give him a round of applause. Thank you. Okay, so my first question, and I am going to come out in the audience, and we're going to have plenty of time for you to ask your questions. But my first question for you, Lexi, is we've been talking about this now for, 2 months, maybe 3 months. Is it possible for our dream of becoming the #1 civility city in the country, is that even possible?
I think of course it is. Anything's possible, Jeff. I think that what I add to this conversation is, I hope, a humility that no single public policy, no single person, no single politician is going to change is the problem or is the solution. That this is it's a collective effort, and it's a spontaneous thing. It's how do we create cultures that voluntarily have these habits of citizenship and civility in their everyday. So absolutely, it's possible.
And that's great, because what we want to do before we leave here tonight is to have some understanding and some concepts about how do we practice this in our daily lives. So I'll maybe move to that question next. What are some practical things? I've read about porching, and you just talked about that. Maybe civility dish is coming, but what are some other things that our great crowd here can do tomorrow when their neighbor sees them at their mailbox? What'd you do last night? Oh, I did this, and you must know about it.
Well, first of all, it's just remembering the difference between civility and politeness. That it's actually entirely possible to be nice and polite, to say and do the proper thing, and not be very kind, not be very civil, not be very respectful. And conversely, it's entirely possible to break the rules of propriety or not follow them and be actually civil, actually loving, actually respectful. The story I love that really well embodies that is when Queen Victoria of England was hosting a state dinner that the Queen of Persia was the guest of honor at. And at dinner, the Queen of Persia did the unthinkable. She took the bowl in front of her that was intended for fingers and tipped it to her lips and drank it as soup. And this is Victorian England, the most arcane system of manners that you can conceive of. But what did Queen Victoria do? The room was silent and gasped. What would she do? She did the exact same thing. She tipped the bowl to her lips and drank as well. She broke her own rules of propriety and etiquette. Why? For the sake of friendship, for the sake of trust and conversation and making her guests feel welcome and comfortable. So first thing that can be done is remember the essential distinction between civility and politeness and prioritize the disposition, the inner motivation behind the act rather than the form of the act itself. Don't be content with the technique and the ephemera alone. Cultivate the disposition of actually respecting others first and foremost. So that's one thing we can do. We can seek to become, as Pope Francis said, artisans of the common good. We can affirm the dignity and the humanity of our fellow citizens, our fellow human beings, at the everyday junctures of life. It's really easy to just go through life with a utilitarian mindset. I'm just going to buy my groceries and move on to my day. I'm just going to get in this Uber and then go. But as opposed to looking people in the eye, talking with them. Those small things affirm the dignity and the humanity of the other, as opposed to just, getting into the Uber and being on your phone. And but it is the small things. This is a core argument of my book, that the small things have big consequences, very big consequences. So that's the second thing. Elevate, recover, ennoble life's everyday junctures by becoming artisans of the common good. A third thing we can do is reach across the divide. We can intentionally go out of our way to be gracious and kind to the other, the stranger, the person that we differ from. True civility, it's easy. It's easy and conventional to be good and kind to people who we like, who are like us, who can't do anything, who can benefit us in return. But the test of true civility is how we treat people we don't like. People who can't, who are not like us, and people who cannot repay us for our graciousness and for our kindness. But that's actually when civility matters most, when the stakes feel high, and even when there's no consequences for it, when no one's watching. And I could go on, but I'll let you buy the book to get the rest of the ideas.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm going to let you go on. But does anybody have a question? I've asked two, so I promise. Okay, I'm going to come out into the crowd with my little microphone, and I'll come that way next. But let's do this. Yes, sir. What's your question?
Thanks for coming tonight. Basic question for me. You throw in some terms in your book. You talk about harm. You talk about human flourishing. Human flourishing is, you hear Sam Harris, for example, talk about human flourishing, what constitutes human flourishing. There's a bit of it's an Inigo Montoya problem, right? You keep saying those words. I don't know what they mean when you said what you think they mean, right? Who defines what is harm? Who defines what is flourishing, right? Isn't that a basic question? Or is it like Potter Stewart, we know it when we see it?
Thank you.
It's a great question. And, the fundamental question of philosophy is the question of the universal and the particular. What is universally true in all times and in all places? And what is true in a particular context? What is culturally contingent and informed by local realities that are so particular truths and universal truths? And what I actually discovered while writing my book is that there tends to be a cultural contingent to politeness. Politeness tends to be very changeable within a society, like across class and across cultures, and between societies as well, so across history and across culture. And often, manners and politeness are a tool of exclusion. They're a tool of recognizing insider from outsider, and I'll give you an example of that. In 18th century England, the pineapple that we can buy for $1.99 at Costco was the epitome of luxury and hospitality in aristocratic homes during this era. And a common pineapple could go for $50,000, just astronomical. And but then some very industrious merchants began to rent out pineapples. You didn't have to, take out a second mortgage to own a pineapple. You could rent one out for an evening and impress your friends and send it back the next day. So these roving pineapples around. And then there was some technological innovations, and they had greenhouses and were able to grow pineapples in England and not import them from around the world, which was very costly. And then, all of a sudden, everyone had access to the pineapple. So what did the cultural elites and the aristocrats do? They had to move on. If everyone had the vulgar many had the pineapple, which no longer, this rarity, this symbol of elite hospitality. And so the moment that the masses catch on with manners and with norms and tastes, that tends to produce evolution in these norms and tastes. So politeness tends to be changeable. Civility tends to be remarkably timeless. I explore this in chapter 2 of my book. I survey, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, to ancient Greek texts. I talk about Isocrates, the mismanners of the Greco-Roman world, to Tahotep, who I talked about from ancient Egypt, to Daniel of Beccles in the Middle Ages. So to ancient Arabian texts of this topic. And there tends to be a common thread that the hallmark of true civility is restraint of the self so that the social within us can flourish and we become fully human. And what I get from reading these same kind of tenets and maxims that surface independently of one another often across history and culture is that this is not a foregone conclusion. This is something that is not natural to us, and that we have to cultivate these habits, and we have to be reminded of them constantly. And I consider myself just the latest in a long lineage of robust and thoughtful thinkers and thoughtful writers on this topic. And so what is human flourishing? People have independently thought the good life is the life in community, the life of restraint, the life of self-governance, the life of freedom, the life of fulfilling our potential as human beings. And that's not me talking of myself, that's me informed by texts and wise thinkers across history and culture.
All right, I love it when I see heads nodding in agreement. That's great. Okay, so Lexi, this next, so we have people watching online, and we're getting questions in the back from those online. This question comes to you from Chicago, Illinois, from a gentleman by the name of Brad Worrell, who happens to be a 5th grade teacher in Chicago. His question is, can we teach civility to our children? Would you mind spending just a moment on that?
Yes, of course we can. Thank you, Brad Worrell, for tuning in all the way from Chicago, Illinois. And I mean, education is essential. It's such an important part of this conversation. And it's why I spend an entire chapter of my book on education in the final section of my book called Civility in Practice. I have a chapter on hospitality and what that means today, and then a chapter on education. And a key part of teaching civility in classrooms is, again, I think focusing on, again, not just the action, but also the motivation, focusing not just on cultivating a generation of kids that know how to follow the rules, although that is important in schools, but also helping kids to actually be kind and be good and not be content with them just seeming good and appearing good. The educational project is at its core about creating good humans. That's what education is. It's cultivating our humanity, bringing forth that which is best in us. The Latin root of education is educare, which means to call forth and lead forth. And it's about bringing forth, leading forth that which is most noble in us, refining that, making it better, and repressing and diminishing that which is ignoble, the cruel and the malicious that is within each of us. And one important way to do that is, traditionally, has been to teach it, to practice it, and to embody it, like leading by example. And so that's a really essential role that teachers have, but also parents have. And I talk a lot in the book about creating ecosystems of civility where there's a partnership between home life and school life. There has to be, and because it ultimately has to start in the home. Like even the best teacher in the world, like one Brad Worrell may be, is going to be handicapped and incapacitated and limited in their effectiveness without a home life that supports what's being taught, gains that are being made in the classroom. So I think it first and foremost has to start in the home. This is where these conversations, these habits should be formed and had and modeled. And but of course, having that reinforced in the classroom is essential as well.
Lexi, that's amazing. And of course, we had a very good meeting. We connected with the administration for Carmel Clay Schools this afternoon. Emily Bauer, are you here? Yeah. Emily Bauer, are you here? Emily, yeah, back in the back. So thank you. I didn't mean to steal your thunder, but it seems so timely with this question. And so I heard two great things. Exactly what Lexi just said from, and I don't want to misquote, but Dr. Ferris, who's the principal of Carmel High School. Generally speaking, our kids are pretty darn polite. We see civility, but we do need help in the home, as you said. You know, there are cases where the parents might not be modeling civility, and that's where we're going to try and come in. And but they've got a pretty good thing going. So anyway, so Emily, if you want to share anything, I'll give you some time at the end. Okay. Okay, but over here to Jake, I think. Here we go. Let me pass that down.
Just absolutely love your book. The two things: one, the history element of it. And this stuff ain't new. I think that was number one. And then the second is at the end of the chapter, you gave practical advice. It seems that in our environment, there's a lot of rage, a lot of anger, almost like just real pain and like almost a time bomb going off. Do you have any practical advice how to diffuse that bomb of anger when you're confronted with, I mean, it's scary at times where you're in front of someone that's just in a civil manner, how to diffuse that bomb?
Great question.
Thank you so much for reading the book and for that thoughtful question. My mother and my grandmother are exceptional examples to me in this way to answer your question. My grandmother was superlative in the art of what I call recognizing the thing beneath the thing. So someone has a hair trigger temper and goes off like that because you've cut them off in traffic. She would be the first to say, wow, like that's not about me. Like that's not about this instance, whatever it is. There's clearly something else going on here, something deeper, and she would tell a story of exoneration. She would tell a story that exempted that person from not from total culpability, but from telling. What my tendency is too often, and what I think the common tendency is in a moment where someone bites your head off, is to tell a story of condemnation, where we are judge, jury, and executioner in that moment. We think that we want to judge that entire person and our experience, but through our experience, our limited experience with them, and they're a jerk, they're a bad person, they're an evil person. And we hear a lot of that moral language today. Instead of taking a step back, and leaving it open a little bit, and telling a story of exoneration. Like, did that person get a bad diagnosis this morning? Are they getting a divorce? What is going on in their life that could be causing this like turmoil and suffering? And to see that, and my grandmother was exceptional, especially, and so was my mother, at responding in gentleness and in kindness when the impulse is to respond in kind, right? Like they lash out at you, you lash back. That's the animalistic impulse in us, the defensiveness in us. But I think civility calls us to a higher standard. And this is so hard. It is so hard to rise above that instinctive response that wants to bite back, but to rise above it and say, no, I'm going to act in alignment with my values, which is affirming the dignity and humanity of the other, even when it's hard, even when they're not acting like a very good human or very humanely. And I'm going to be kind and gentle. And I saw countless times where my grandmother diffused a thoughtless or cruel person, or even my mother, with just a gentle word. Like my grandmother would think, I'm not going to make this person's day worse. They're clearly already having a bad day. I'm not going to make it worse by piling on and being cruel and malicious on top of that. And we see this in the small ways. We see people like overreacting and lashing out in the small junctures of life, but we see it on national television as well. We see it in our public leaders too. Like, I think we're all like powder kegs, and we're all kind of running on empty, emotionally and spiritually and psychologically. And I talk about this in the final chapter of my book, that one way to curb against this is to kind of fill ourselves up emotionally, psychologically, by having these habits of self-care and renewal. And I specifically talk about encountering nature and the transcendent and the sublime, and having all walks where you're just in nature and paying attention to the small things, or you're looking up at space at night and experiencing the vastness of the universe and contemplating about how small we are and our petty problems are. That there's a whole literature, in fact, and a whole philosophical tradition of why that's so good for the soul. It displaces our sense of self, and it puts our quotidian problems into perspective in really important ways. And then we have a little bit more grace. That when someone else has a hair trigger and goes off on us, we have a little bit more grace that we're able to tolerate that and move about our day without it destroying us. But I think too many of us we're just exhausted and we're running on empty. And having some of these small habits of rejuvenation gives us an important equanimity that is so lacking, and grace that is so lacking in our world today. So that's the final chapter of my book.
All right, so the thing under the thing. Okay, we're going to remember that. Did someone have a question over this way? Oh, here it is.
Yeah. So you mentioned in Washington that you had people that would stab you in the back, essentially run as the jerks, right? And it seems like the jerks are the ones in charge. They're the ones with power. So I guess my question is, what hope do we have for civility if the people who are the most powerful are jerks and they're not civil? What is civility something that can actually give you power? And if so, how do we convince the jerks to be civil?
Yeah, we like that one. That's a good one.
So it's a great question. Thank you. I'll answer it in two parts. In the first place, we hear a lot that civility is, nice guys finish last, and you have to be willing to be a bully, to be the strong man, in order to win, in order to beat the other side. And we hear this increasing apocalyptic rhetoric that's really harmful. I have a whole chapter in my book on actually on civil disobedience and how civility, on how maintaining the dignity and respect of the other, as you protest, as you take action, as you stand up against injustice and stand up to bullies and strongmen, that has been historically a tool of winning, of social progress and social and cultural change. I talk about Frederick Douglass and William Lloyd Garrison and people who were not wilting violets, but they cared deeply about how the means mattered. I talk about Gandhi, I talk about Henry David Thoreau, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that they knew that winning at any cost would compromise their entire moral project of equal human equality. And so Dr. King, for example, he had a system of, and it's Martin Luther King Day just around the corner, so very appropriate to be reflecting on his important life and legacy now. But Dr. King had this process of purification. Anyone who wanted to be part of his peaceful, nonviolent resistance movement had to first undergo this process of purification, whereby they purified their motives and really cultivated civility, as I define in my book, cultivating a fundamental love of humanity, especially those that they were protesting, the white supremacists and the persons who held bigoted views. And it was only after they cultivated love and respect for them that Dr. King allowed them to be part of the sit-ins and the protests. That love and respect for them, for the other, the people that were protesting, actually informed the protest, compelled the protest. It was out of love, saying, you have a inaccurate view of the world, where you see other human beings as not equal to you. And I respect you enough to show you that is an inaccurate view of the world. I'm going to take a stand. And so I unpack that and many other examples of how civility, as I define it in my book, has been and can once again be this tool of winning and of making our world better, more just, and more equal. And the second thing I'll say is that it's the easiest thing in the world to be looking out and pointing fingers at who is the problem. And when it comes to this question of civility. And a real call, a message in my book is that we have to stop doing that. And that actually change starts with us. We should focus, turn our criticism and our desire to see the world be a better place inward, and focus on improving ourselves first. How are we making the world a more gentle, softer, more civil place, a brighter place for future generations to live in, which is the motivation for me writing this book. I wrote it in hopes that this book, it makes the world a more gentle place. My 4-year-old Crystal James and it's the one that has turned to my 2 children. And that really is the theory of social change in the book, that don't blame media, don't blame Facebook and technologies, don't blame public leaders who are not being civil and other epiphenomena, but focus on ourselves. And that's really the story and the metaphor of porching embodies, that it doesn't matter whether you have a porch or not, it's about how you use what you have. And are we using the resources that we each have? Are we using our lives to be tools of healing and reconciliation and community? Because we can. We have way more power than we realize to either be part of the problem with how we interact with others online or in person, or to be part of the solution. And I hope people leaving this room tonight feel more empowered to be part of the solution.
Yeah. All right, let me grab one over here for you, Lexi.
Thank you, Lexi. I'm Dr. Toby Malachi, founding executive chairman, global head of investment, development, and diplomacy. This is my 7th White House administration I'm advisor to. I understand Washington.
I'm sorry. Condolences.
If I could only blush. I'm honored to meet you and speak with you and be here as someone that I have such admiration and respect for, knows no bounds. Chairman Worrell, thank you for putting this on, sir. My question is, I deal with world leaders, world business leaders, heads of state, ministerial level. I lived here in Carmel 7 years. I had some concerns about Carmel when I came out, because Carmel, Indiana, I heard like La La Land, Carmelot, all the different kind of things. But since I've been here, boy, the people have just been outstanding to me, just outstanding. It's been great. And so I need to say that because I'm not the only Italian in the room. I saw another brother over there. And so I saw that how can you have a conversation about the soul civility without a soul brother? And I was concerned about the balance of that. And there's a concern I had, because see, I sit across world leaders, and there's 2 very controversial. One I won't mention his name because it's very timely what's going on in the Middle East right now. Met with him personally before he was living. Was in the White House on the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So when I deal with people, I'm dealing with what the gentleman talked about. He was very kind in his words. I deal with them all the time. And a lot of times I'm the only black in the room representing America, representing the White House, representing business. And a lot of tension is on me. If one misspoken word, I can cause an international incident. That's the pressure that's on me. So you mentioned a word that I love. It's in your book, Greek word, philatimo. It means love of thyself. Dr. Martin Luther King talked about that. And I'd like you to expound upon that, because you and I have dealt in this world. I know Chairman has as well, and others in this room, I know you have. When you meet somebody, and, oh, how you doing? Oh, you're so great. You're so wonderful. We should have lunch sometime. Let's go do this. You turn your back and whoa, they take your back out. What is your technique on that? I read about that in your preliminary. What's your technique for handling something like that?
Thank you so much. Pleasure to meet you as well. My book is really a humanistic manifesto. The word that you referred to, philanthropia, it comes from the Greek word philo, which means love, and anthropos, which means human and humanity. And my book is about how we can recover just a fundamental and generalized philanthropia. And I think what we suffer from today is a hyper-localized philanthropia, where we love and like just those, again, who like us, who we agree with, and who can benefit us. But we actually do owe others, like just a bare minimum of respect, just the everyday person we encounter, just by virtue of our shared moral status as members of the human community. And what do we do with people who stab us in the back, who mislead us, right? Who do one thing, say another. And it's a hard one. And how do we caution? How do we not allow ourselves to become hardened? We get betrayed one time and we become more calloused, and we, might meet another person and think, oh, is this person going to betray me as well? And how do we instead, I have this idea in my book, I call it unbundling people. And unbundling experiences. How do we unbundle people and see the part and light of the whole? How do we see, one opinion of someone, one thing they've said or done that we might disagree with or think is horrible? How do we see that part of them in light of their dignity and beauty and irreducible moral worth as human beings? Because too often today, we learn one thing about someone, one unsavory thing or one opinion we disagree with, and we define the whole person by that one thing. And that is so essentializing and reductive and degrading of the dignity of the human personality. And so unbundling people is that concept, seeing the part in light of the whole. But then, to your question, how can we also unbundle experiences? Like we're betrayed or hurt by a person of one group, but how do we not bring that hurt and that woundedness, that mistrust into all of our other experiences? But how do we say, okay, that was that, but take each person afresh and give them the benefit of the doubt. Like that's what a democracy and a society requires that we do. It requires a generalized trust, not a general cynicism or skepticism. So it's a great question.
Yeah, perfect question. Check in. How are we doing? Are you getting what you came for? Are you? Okay. All right. I am going to be respectful of your time, but I'd like to do 2 more questions and then fill you in on what our next steps are. Is everybody in agreement with that? Okay, and I can do more, but I do want to make sure. Okay, so yes, let me reach over you.
Lexi, I'm going to say, I'm very impressed with your message. You are polished, and so you kind of not really speak against etiquette, but you definitely have both sides of the coin. So what I'm most impressed with is your thoughts about turning inward and looking at our own action before pointing fingers at others. And so I have done this, or tried, not perfect, my whole life. And I feel like the most important ways that we can be civil are kindness and service. Can I help others in some way? And so there's a real, tiny way that we can do this. And so both Jeff and Brad and some others asked, how can we help make Carmel the #1 most civil place in the world? And so I'm going to kind of paint a picture for you. You go to Aldi and you put a quarter in the cart, and at the end, when you're done with your groceries, you take the cart back up to the store to get your quarter back, right? You're going to help out in the whole parking lot situation at Aldi for a quarter. What if we could do that at Kroger and Walmart and everywhere and just forget the quarter? All right? Take the cart back up to the store. Help out.
This is a civilization, sir. Exactly.
And so this is a little bit of an anecdote, and I'll end here. But my wife and I were first dating, and we go to Kroger, and I go over and get out the car, and I get a cart, and I'm taking it up. And as I'm doing this, I see her over there, she's got a cart and she's taking it up. I'm like, you did that just because you saw me do it. And it's not true. She and I are of the same mind. This is my lovely wife, Beverly. But I think, if you want to make Carmel the #1 most civil place in America, take your cart up. That's
That's correct. Here, here.
Okay, Carlos, we're gonna start there, Carlos, okay? Now, you don't work for Kroger, do you? Okay, all right.
It wasn't a question.
Yeah.
It was just a great call. I
Okay,
agree. Yeah.
Great, now I've got time for another one, so I'm gonna run right over here.
Just want to point out I'm the only woman who's asked a question right now. Okay. Hi, thank you so much for this. I spent a 2-hour breakfast with an executive coach today, and we talked so much about this. We both feel the word I chose was goofy. Feels very goofy entering 2024. And it's because there's a heaviness that is tangible throughout our whole world. Because I have a full belief that we are all interconnected. And it is the thing that drives me in my work, in my parenting, in my marriage, how I operate in the city of Carmel. And so I'm just really grateful for this. I will say one of the things that you had said, I've been taking notes over here, that's my thing. A timeless human problem and the solution is civility. And that was encouraging for me to know that there's this history, right? That it's just, if time isn't cyclical necessarily, or maybe it is, who knows? What is time? 2020 taught us that. But it's this idea that, okay, we've always been here, but we just have to keep breaking the cycle and breaking the cycle. And I have 2 city councilors in this room. And so I'm going to take this moment and say, this is it. Like, this is the moment we get to choose as a city. You have 100 people here, 300 people, even online, sitting before you, listening to Civility. You all are in charge of writing laws with approvals of all these things. You have a huge job. I am someone who sits on the adult advisory board for Carmel Pride. I get to hang out with these high schoolers, these queer high school kids who just want to be seen, who just want to be loved, who just want to be celebrated. And they desperately just want to have a party and have a day here. And so I'm just going to take that moment and say, this is that time to acknowledge the humanness of our kids, no matter their age, the humanness of each other. I mean, this is the conversation we can, and I'm so happy we're having right now, especially in Carmel.
I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for those remarks. Appreciate that.
And if they don't feel welcome and happy, shame on us. So we'll try and do better. I had another female, but I was going to get that in since, okay, where was he? Right here. Oh, female. Okay, great.
Very short. I taught speech back in the 60s, 70s. I've been here in Carmel since the 60s. And met with Brainerd before he even ran. I have 2 things to say. Here's the way we do it. In God we trust. That's on our coin. And the second thing is, well, we're God's. That's what happens when you turn 80. I just wanted to know that all we have to do is have the freedom, and as she says, individually, and this is where it will happen. Brainerd and I had no idea. We talked about vision, and you would laugh at what our vision was. And back in 1992, we had no idea. And it's in God we trust. And let's see what happens. It'll be great.
All right. Amen to that. Can we do another one, please? I'm having fun. All right. Oh, and now I've got every hand, so female. All right. Okay, right over here.
Hi there, thoroughly enjoying your description, your book, and the great questions. So thank you for that. My question is, when we get to some of these ways we've siloed ourselves, and I think that's one of the things that's happening in our world is we're just becoming more and more smaller and smaller groups. Let's say we reach out to someone, on one of these really hot button topics. We know we disagree. Do you address that, like how to speak in those conversations, where you're probably not going to change the person's mind, and that's okay. But I feel like over the last several years now, we're not allowed to say certain things, and that's a real problem. So I'm just wondering, do you have any thoughts on that? Maybe it's addressed in the book. I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to. Thanks.
Thanks so much for that question. So my thoughts are twofold. One is to approach those conversations not with the intention to persuade, but the intention to learn. I have a whole chapter in my book. In the final chapter, I talk at length about curiosity. Why curiosity, a little curiosity can go a long way to healing our profound divides right now that we're experiencing at a societal, but also at a micro-social level, where families are being broken apart and friendships are ending and people are cutting one another off over these differences, and they can't have these conversations anymore, which is just so heartbreaking. That's not how it should be. So when you have those conversations, going in with an honest curiosity, like not just saying, this is what you think, therefore you must think this, and making these mental shortcuts about, that you assume everything you need to know about a person by that one aspect of how they view the world. But, how did you come to view that? And what experiences have you had that have led you to that? But I would also say that we have these kind of conversations way too much. The final chapter of my book is on misplaced meaning and forgiveness, where I argue that we've made idols out of politics, that democracy is a good thing, but as these traditional touchstones of meaning, like church, like community and civil society and even friendship have declined in recent decades, these are traditionally where we've gotten our meaning and identity from, and now we've found our identity in these political and public issues. And because of that, it's corroded our ability to talk about these issues well, because now a disagreement is no longer rational minds having a disagreement and disagreeing. It's existential. You disagree with me, and therefore I'm under attack, I'm under assault, therefore you're the bad person, you're the aggressor, and I'm the victim. And that's bad at a soulish level to see all interactions in those terms, but also it's bad for democracy if we're not able to have that depends on robust disagreement. Like the dialogue and debate is the lifeblood of our democratic institutions and our way of life. We have to be able to rationally disagree, and we can't assume that every disagreement is an existential threat to who we are, and therefore we want to silence it. And so one of my recommendations is to talk about politics less, like relegate politics, make it matter less, and then once we've relegated politics, we have to fill up that space in our mental consciousness and lives with something better and more beautiful. I talk about friendship, especially friendship across difference, because often we don't have the basic trust and affection before having these hot button conversations, and that's very, very emblematic of but we see that in our world today, where we're just constantly assuming the worst about others across difference. I talk about curiosity. I talk about beauty and the sublime, like I mentioned. So if you have to have those conversations, approach them with curiosity. But my advice is to talk about each other more. Just talk about other shared loves more. And not just I feel like so much of our mental consciousness goes right to the hot button issues, because that's what we allow to saturate our minds, and we're oversaturated with the hot button issues. So relegate them. We have way more power to control what we consume. Like, I am not a consumer of news. I do not read the news. I focus on my family. I focus on my creative work. I try not to focus my mental energy on things that I can't control, and that make us angry. We're the product. We're the revenue stream. We have power over that. And so there are little things that we can do to to just desaturate our lives from that lower the stakes, lower the temperature in our own lives, and allow us to, I think, have higher quality of life as a result, hopefully.
Excellent question. Excellent question. Okay, I have to draw the Q&A to an end, but we have 3 more things that we are going to do. But first, Lexi Hudson, you are fabulous. The first one is for Lexi's marketing, and we're trying to push this book and get it going. I'm going to ask Lexi to stand right here, and we're going to take your picture, Lexi, with all these great people. Does anyone have a book in their hand that you want to hold it? And we're going to take your picture. Who will take our picture for us? Oh, selfie. All right. These young kids. Okay. All right. Here we go. This is okay. Oh my gosh. Can we get a few thumbs up and yeah, some fun? Can we get some fun? All right. Great. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. Thank you for humoring us. Okay, number 2 is that I promised you that we would try and have some next steps. So in 2 minutes, I am going to tell you what our next steps are. The first one is I am thrilled, and I hope you will be too, that we have a second event with Lexi. I thought I would get some hoops and hollers. Come on, a second event. All right, or she won't come. So, all right, March 6th, Wednesday, March 6th, mark it on your calendar. We are going to be at the Meeting House in the Village of West Clay. They have a room that will do 300. We're going to go over to the west side, and we will continue our civility discussion. So between now and March 6th, my job is to communicate with you. So if you signed up, if you registered, or you were on the wait list, you're good. If you did neither of those and you were a walk-in, I've got some clipboards where we'd like to have your email address if you would like to be contacted about what our next steps are. I'm going to send you a survey to ask you, where do you want to go? A survey that says, what do you think is important? Help me to understand what you think the problem is. And then Lexi and I and some others will huddle and we'll figure out what then to do at our March 6th event. We will, so that will go out, that will come probably from the library. I'm not sure how we're going to work that out yet. I'm also thrilled to announce that every week in the Current and Carmel, we're going to have our own civility box. All right? So, does that show you, there are thousands of good things that should be in the Carmel, the Current and Carmel, and civility just generated by the power of Lexi Hudson's work is just so exciting. So I hope to be in your, in your eyeballs every week. So you got to read the Current and Carmel, all right? That's one thing. And then I think that's probably it. Just make sure we know how to communicate with you. So now I have left some time, as we promised you, that you now can purchase the book. For those of you that would like to do so, you're going to buy them over here. You're going to walk this way, and Lexi will be over there to sign them, right, Lexi?
Yes.
Okay, and I apologize. We didn't get to every question. I didn't even know if anyone would come tonight. So I am thrilled that you had questions and that you're here. I am here to serve. I hear you. I want to make sure that you tell me if there's something wrong, something that I need to work on, like we heard over to the left, and if there's anything that you would like to do to make civility grow in Carmel. All right? Give it up for Lexi Hudson. I am so thankful that she's here. So let's go ahead and start our lines over here. Thank you for coming. Please drive home safely. Appreciate it.